Can I get started?
Actually, we can't see the second one. We still see the first slide.
Okay. You see that? The transition?
Yes, yes.
Sounds good. Okay, sounds good. Okay, so I'm going to get started. My name is Roger Diaz, as I was introduced, and I'm speaking here from Boston, the United States. And I'm a physician by training. I did my training in internal medicine and emergency medicine back in Brazil, where I came from. And currently, I'm an assistant professor for emergency medicine here at Harvard Medical School. I work as the director of research innovation at the Stratus Center for Medical Simulation here in Boston. That's a training center for the Mass General Brigham Hospital Network. That's the network of hospitals affiliated with the Harvard Medical School. And it's a great pleasure to be here to talk on the 12th National Medical Education Congress. And we're going to talk about organizational change in medical education, right? And I had the opportunity to take a look on the program of the Congress, and I'm really excited about the Congress. I wish I could like stay and watch the other lectures as well, because I think this is a very important topic, something that will really impact the medical education in your institutions. Of course, it's a process. It's a long and hard process. However, organizational change is in the essence of any medical education institution, whatever it is, like a university, medical, nursing school, or a hospital-based academic institution. And through my presentation, what I would like to convey is how this topic is even more important nowadays, right? 2022 compared to 30, 40, 50 years ago, the pace in which the medical education is changing, it's tremendous, right? The velocity, the speed in which medical education and healthcare in general is changing, it's really huge. And we as educators, health professionals, researchers, and medical educators, we need to be prepared to this new world. That's not only new, but also changing in a very fast pace. So I'm going to start my presentation. I have no conflict of interest related to this presentation. And I'm going to start here bringing here the theme that was proposed to me to talk, right? And when I saw this for the first time, I was really intrigued. And I'd like, again, to congratulate the organizing committee to bringing this topic to discussion. And organizational change in medical education, the first thing that intrigued me was change, right? Changing people, right? It's extremely complex and many times difficult. Now, when we talk about changing organization, we have entire different level of complexity, right? Because in the organization, we have different people, a lot of different people come from different places, different perspectives, and everyone there, right, is trying to do their jobs, doing what they think it's correct, what they think it's right, but also with the vision of the future, right? And that's the complex of change. And at the end, organizational change, it's a change of a person, change of people, change of behaviors. And that's what makes it very complicated sometimes and very complex. However, we need to navigate that complexity, because I think that organizational change is not only necessary, but is really a must do for any organization in the world, medical education, healthcare, who really wants to be at the top and the cutting edge of medical education and healthcare. Now, the subtopic, I found that even more intriguing, because that's transformation in medical education leadership, right? So one thing is change the organization. The different thing is to transform that organization, right? And that's a very ambitious goal but that's also necessary. And we can change without transform, right? But in order to transform, there are a lot of things to change, a lot of people, a lot of structures, a lot of the organizational culture, right? And the other thing that I really like is the other word is leadership, right? Because in my view as well, the only way to be successful in transforming medical education and implementing organizational change in medical education, not only medical education, but in general, is through leadership, right? So the leadership, the role of leadership in organizational change and transformation of an organization, it's imperative. It's very, very important. And I would say that it's only through leadership and with the correct vision that we will be able to change our organization on the level that we're going to say, okay, the organization was transformed. So these are the other subtopics that I also found very interesting. I'm going to bring them here because I want you really to reflect on all these subtopics and these questions while I'm talking. And of course, I have here 35 minutes. I definitely won't be able to go deep into each one of these, but I saw the program of the Congress, and I'm sure all the topics will cover this. And more important, right? The goal here is really to spike some and prompt some reflections and maybe give you some strategies in how to facilitate organization change in your institution and how to transform medical education. But I'm going to read here because they are very important to be on the back of our mind while I'm talking. So what does organization change mean, right? What is the difference between change someone, something, and change an organization? Why do organizations want to change, right? Or why wouldn't they want to change? That's a very important question as well, that we're going to address that. What are the factors that facilitate and hinder organizational change? Barriers, facilitators, organizational change. What change process stages go through, right? So what are like successful strategies, successful past strategies that we can learn from? How should we change organization? So again, what techniques, what methods, what strategies should we implement? What difficulties can we experience? And what can we do to ensure the permanence of the change made in the organization, right? That's another challenge. Okay, now we achieved a organizational change and transformation, but how to keep that change, right? From not going back to the old model, to the previous model. So I hope at the end of this presentation, although it's 35 minutes, I'll be able to touch in each one of these, but more important to spike in your mind the reflection of the necessary change that we have to go through, especially nowadays, right? The world is very, very different from 1 decade ago, and the next decade, the world is going to be much, much, much different than 10 years ago. So the path of change in the world, in several aspects, it's really, really a fast-paced, and we need to keep up with that. So some definitions, right? It's important to define. So one of the definitions I brought here from Tim Stolberski is organizational change refers to actions in which a company or business alters a major component of its organization. It could be a culture, the underlying technology, the infrastructure it used to operate, or internal processes, right? Now, in order to promote organizational change, it's very important the organization have a organizational change management plan, right, and a strategy. And this covers the method of leveraging change to bring about a successful resolution, and typically include like different phases, right? And some people will implement organizational change through projects. Some people will implement through strategies. Now, two important definitions, right? We have adaptive change that are like small incremental change in organizations that adopt this to address needs that evolve over time, right? And that's, I would say that most of organizations are doing some type of adaptive change. Now, When you go to transformation change, we're in another level, right? We talk about the large scale and scope than adaptive change. And transformation change can often involve a simultaneous shift, not only on process, but also in the mission, the strategy of the company, the team structure, the organizational structure of people, processes, technologies, organizational performance, and business process, right? So it's very important here to really differentiate the different type of change. And I agree that in medical education, I don't have a profound knowledge of how medical education is done in Turkey, but I have here in the West, and I have in Brazil and a few other countries, China, and I would say that in all cases, medical education requires a transformational change. Here in the West, here at Harvard, in all institutions. And I'm gonna expand why I think in any of these places, medical education and healthcare needs a transformational change. So when you go to the literature, right, this is not a new problem, right? How to change, the difficulties of change is not a new problem. We find articles from 1946, 1950s, the 50s, right? At the Harvard Business Review, for example. And it's very interesting because most of the articles, most of the literature and the business case on organizational change talk about how hard it is, right? Talk about how difficult it is, how complex it is. And what I noticed over time is that the difficulties and the challenges are almost the same, even if you have like a 100 years timeline. The difficulties, the challenges are almost the same. And more important is that besides many strategies and many techniques and many people from business, management, administration, trying to come with a certain set of tools and instruments and strategies and techniques to facilitate change in organization, what we still see is this type of thing, right? So despite universal recognition of the need to change and adapt frequently, businesses or organizations in general have, if anything, gotten worse at it. Some studies suggest that as many as 75% of change initiatives fail. Here's another one, a quote from another article saying that the failure rate of organizational transformations continues hovering around 70%. And from McKinsey. And these are like consulting companies, right? So it's a very common approach in traditional organizations to have a consulting company, McKinsey, Deloitte, just to manage the change in organization due to the complexity and the previous failures in trying to change, especially when we talk about transformational change. So it could be very frustrating, right, to see that over like 50, 60 years, we all need to change every year, every decade. I would say that we need to change more in a faster pace, as I mentioned before, but still our strategies, our techniques, our methods still fail at the same rate, right? So what to do? What can we do to change this panorama? What can we do to change these statistics? And that there is no easy answer for that, right? There is like an entire body of literature and evidence and experience from other people, and there is no silver bullet that will solve all the problems and help that. But there are some things that I'm going to bring here, not only from the literature, but also from my personal experience in working in institutions and implementing change. I've had the opportunity to work in like healthcare institutions, managing an emergency department back in Brazil, in which we had to implement huge change in the workflow and how people work, implementing new technologies. Later here in the West, I have the role of like managing medical education and curriculum development in our institution. So I'm going to bring a little my perspective on some of the things we can do practically to help us with this huge challenge that's everywhere. So the first thing is really the concept, right? I think the understanding here, it's important, right? I mean, if you go to the organizational change literature, you're going to find ramifications in many fields. You're going to find in organizational psychology, in anthropology, in sociology, in business, in administration, right? And each area try to understand the organization change at a phenomenon. Most of them stop in the understanding level. Others will try things and strategies, and you measure their effectiveness of those strategies. But this concept of social technical system is very important. That's something that we really work very closely in this human factors perspective of human work, how to improve human performance at work, analyzing human factors. And what you're going to see, and I'm sure in your personal experience, that the most difficult and complex part of change is changing people's behavior, right? That's a very difficult. And I mean, that's everywhere. It's not only people behaviors at work, right? If you think about here, I know there are a lot of healthcare providers here, clinicians, changing like patients' behaviors towards like lifestyle, and change people's behavior towards like mental health issues. In every area, it's very, very difficult. So the social technique, understanding our organizations and universities, hospitals, medical schools, any organization, I would say, in medical education and healthcare, as a social technical system, a complex environment. And as a social technical system, there are many things at play, right? So of course, we have people, we have the organization, the organizational structure with its culture and its hierarchical structure, its mission and vision. We have a physical system, right, that's becoming more and more complex. Here's the role of like technology, making that this physical hardware, software facility system is becoming more and more hard, in the way that now as people, we also have to interact with technology. And a lot of this technology is becoming very, very intelligent, right? With artificial intelligence and autonomous systems. And of course, there is our task. That's our work, right? What we do every day in our work. And when you go to the people here, right, there are people doing their work, but there are cognitive skills, decision-making, and situation awareness, and problem solving, and also some social skills that are very important here, that are leadership, communication, coordination, teamwork, right? So all of these play a very important role. But when we talk specifically about organizational change, this relationship here is very important, right? Because you can not change the organization only by changing like individuals, right, in isolation. At the same way, you cannot change people and different people from your organization, your workforce, without initiatives at the organizational level, right? So the both organization and people that are part of this organization play a very important role, and one influence each other, one impact each other, right? So if we want to be successful in implementing change organizations, we need to tackle both. So if you try just at the organizational level change and mandate change down to people, that's not going to be successful. It has been proven that's not successful. You can have change in the short term, but in the long term, if you not involve leadership and people at all levels, at the operational, tactical, and strategic level of organization, you're not going to be successful in the long term, right? At the same time, if you try to, in isolation, make change individual departments with the hope that those small changes will bring change to the entire organization, that also is not going to be successful, because you need to have a integrative and a coordinated plan, not only for how the change will happen, but in how to support people during change, right? So the role for the organization here, and you as like leaders, right? Today leaders or tomorrow leaders, it's to bring the vision and the strategy of the change, but make sure that once change is happening, the organization is supporting the people, is supporting the humans that are there, because change at any level is very difficult, right? And people will start the change, or they will not be motivated to change. And the organization has an important role in helping people, supporting them during the change. And we're going to talk more about that and the behavioral basis for me to say that in a few slides. And here it is. So this is a very interesting framework called Transtheoretical Model, TTM, developed in the 70s by Prokaskar and Di Clemente. And basically, based on several like studies and observation, they classify like the human behavior change in different stages. Okay, so the stage of behavioral change. And I'm bringing this here because at the end, when we say organizational change, organizational transformation, we talk about people's change, right? The organization change cannot change without people. And when we say that the organization was transformed, we really talk about the people there in the organization was transformed. So the stages are very important, and we can usually we can apply this stage of behavior for the patients who wants to change their lifestyle, as I mentioned, patients who need to change their behavior, mental health. But it can also be applicable for like healthy people who need to change their behavior towards work, towards what they do at the organization. And even we can think of this stage for our organization as well. So in which stage are we? So let's one by one. First one is the pre-contemplation. The pre-contemplation stage of any change at the individual or organizational level is that stage in which people are unaware of the problem, right? And that answers one of the questions that I was prompted to, is that if you don't feel there is a problem, why change, right? Why do I need to change myself as an individual or the organization as a whole if we don't see that there is a problem or an opportunity for improvement, right? So the pre-contemplation phase, many people in many organizations will be, because they're going to say the classical sentence, right? Why do I need to change? I've been doing this for 30 years and everything's fine, right? In medical education, an example that I'm sure you hear and see this many times, you try to implement a new or like innovative curriculum or a new active methodology of teaching, and then effectively say, why do I need to change? When I did medical school, I was taught this way. This is the way I teach my students. Why do I need to change? Everything's okay. There is no problem with like giving 3-hour lectures and everyone is sleeping during my lecture and no one paying attention. That's how I was trained, and that's the way I'm going to train my students. So why to change? So those people there are in the pre-contemplation part of medical, of the behavioral change, right? And then as an organization, what is our role? What strategies? Create awareness, right? Show the change values and beliefs, and really show that there is a problem here, even it's not a pain for you specifically, but there is a window of opportunity to change and to improve what we are doing, right? Sometimes it's not about feeling there is a problem, but there is opportunity to improve what we do as professionals. Now, the second phase is the phase of contemplation. So people are aware of the problem and they're even aware of the desire of behavior change, right? But they didn't start trying to change. They're just aware, oh, we need to change, that's not working this way, or the world is different, right? The demands of our students and our professors and faculties are changing. So we as an organization, we need to change, but we didn't start yet and we didn't try. And here we have a very important role, that's persuade and motivate, right? They get the first step. They know that they need to change. Now, how as an organization, we persuade and motivate people to try for the first time and to have a plan in place. Now, the third phase is preparation. Okay, I already know the problem. There is a problem. I aware that I want to change as a person or organization. Now I want to prepare, right? I intention to take action. And here is like really the education part in which we will provide as organization tools for people for planning, right? There is no way that we're going to change the organization without the planning and strategy. So the educate here is really providing knowledge and skills and support for preparing for the change and have a very, very good plan in place for everything that may happen. Now, when we are in action, right, you're really practicing the behavior of change and you're changing things here in the department, changing the institutional level. And that's a very difficult phase, right? Everyone who try to change at organizational level, we have a lot of pushback from people, we have resistance, and there are politics, and there are a lot of things, people happy, people not happy. And the role of the organization is to facilitate action, right? And here, as when I mentioned that the organization needs not only to mandate people to change and give directions, but also give support, provide support for people who are really hardly trying to change or to lead change, because they will need, right? People will need support from the institution because that's a very difficult job to do, to lead change, to change ourselves and to change your group and your team. So facilitate action is very important. And here the last one, right? That's the last prompt question that was given to me that can be explained by this model. That's really maintenance, right? How can we work to sustain the behavior change, right? Sometimes people try and they change, but then it's so hard to keep that change that they go back, right? So reinforce, and here's the role of organization of reinforcing change, reinforcing the achievements, the benefits and the value of those changes, and really support the team towards maintenance of that change. It's very important. So this model is a very interesting model because it applies to the individual and the organizational level. And I found that very helpful to try to understand which level your organization as a whole is, and within your organization, each department, each people, where they are, and based on what they are, you can have the right and most appropriate set of strategies to help them get to the top of the change. And that's very helpful because that's, you can act at the individual level, at the department level, or the whole organizational level. Now, what about medical education, right? Talking here about like people's change and organization change, business organizations. Is there anything specific about medical education and healthcare? All of us will say yes, healthcare is much more complex than other industry. Medical education is complex. We have like faculty, professors, and students, and structures, and it's more and more. But the literature really shows that it's not that different. It is different in terms of like, of course, we talk about patient care, we talk about providing training and creating competent physicians, competent nurses, and health professionals. The stake may be different for like a different industry, but in terms of change and the factors that make change difficult and the strategies to make change happen are really, really the same, because at the end we talk about humans doing stuff and needed to change the way they do things, needing to change the way they think and they reason about things. So when you go to medical education, you're going to find specific, like this one, strategies from the AAMC, is the Association of American Medical Colleges. So it'll be like the association here in the United States responsible for all the medical schools, right? And of course, they are thinking about changing medical education. They recognize that managing organizational change is difficult. But when you go to this type of literature or recommendation, you see that they use the same strategies, and they map the same issues that any other industry not only in medical education uses, because at the end, we talk about changing people's behavior. And in essence, that's really very similar, whatever you are. Some places will be more complex than other. But my point here is that I don't have any specific proven evidence that changing medical education, healthcare in general, have like different strategies that are more successful or not. You're going to see that, for example, for this reference, they are really based on general business literature. Okay, so talk about changes difficult, changes complex. Change needs us, especially leaders, to recognize the institutions as a complex social technical system. There are many things in play. We can use a human behavior change approach to understand where people, organizations, departments are, and help them get into the trait of like in the journey of organizational and personal change. We also saw that in medical education specifically, there are some peculiarities, but the challenges and strategies will be the same. But where should I, as a student, as a teacher, faculty, department chair, chief, dean of a university, right? Where should I start? And my organization start, because it's not a one person job. It's not only the organization side. Where should we as employees and organizations start from to get the change? And the perspective I would like to try here, and my last like few slides, is that what I learned throughout my experiences, right, is that one way that really helps organizations to change is through innovation. When I mean innovation is not about like creating innovative products, creating innovative strategies, but it's really cultivating innovation at the core of your organization, cultivating what we call an innovative mindset. Because if you as an organization, and that's a long-term, that's like a long-term process. It's not something that you do in weeks, months, or even years, but that's a long-term process that needs to be encrusted and included in the mission and vision of your organization, that innovation is at the core. And that's what we have here, that I have the experience to see at the Harvard Medical System, right? Is really that innovation is part of everything. And then we cultivate innovation at the institutional level, but at the individual level, really try to develop as a skill, right? So innovation is not something that we are born with. Can be, some people are born innovative, right? But there are very few. But innovation is a skill that we can develop. We can train innovation, creativity. We can help people to become innovative by having an innovative mindset. Because in my point of view, right, what is the role of innovation? Is to solve problems. How are we going to solve problems? You have to think differently. You have to change. You have to change the way you see the world. You have to change the way you tackle that problem, right? You see that from a different perspective. And you have to try new things and measure the new things you try. So in essence, innovation means change. Change the way we see things, change the way we do things, and try new things, sometimes at a high risk, right? So that's the essence of innovation. So in my point of view, if I could like give one suggestion, that's not an easy one, as I mentioned, is like a long-term process, is for institutions really to invest in innovation, but not innovation I mean like, oh, let's buy a lot of new technology. That's not innovation, right? You're buying what other innovators created, but really innovation at the personal level to help people to be innovating their daily life. And that innovative mindset will make change, especially transformation change, much easier, because individuals who are innovative, they are much less resistant to change, right? Because that's what they do every day in their life by being an innovator. So cultivating innovation in your students, your faculty, your administrators it's very, very important, and it needs to be in the strategy of organization, the mission of the organization, how we're going to do that, right? So the other thing I'd like to bring, especially when we talk about now specific about medical education, right? In order to educate the medical students of the present, right? And here's the health profession of the present, if you talk about other health professional schools, we need to know what the physician of the future will look like, right? What the health profession of the future would look like. Because many times, and you see this, right? That's the problem. That's why we need to change medical education. The people and the way we're training health professionals today, their actual work as a professional 6 years, 5 years from now, 10 years from now will be totally different, right? Medicine, healthcare is changing very, very fast. We train someone with a technique, a certain knowledge today, focus on content, right? Curriculum, focus on content, not focus on competence. 5, 6 years from now, the practice of medicine is different. And probably the way they're going to treat patients is a different way that they didn't learn during medical school, because medical knowledge and techniques and technology incorporation is changing too fast, right? So how to tackle this challenge? And one thing I like to do is for us as educators in medical education, think about, okay, and that's a guess, right? Because that's a prediction, it's difficult to predict, but what's going to be the physician of the future? What's going to be a physician 10 years from now, and how 10 years before today, we can implement change in our curriculum, in our medical education, that will help that physician, that health professional to really work at their higher performance in the hospital. And this is not a new problem, right? This is an article from 1966 about reflection of a surgeon in Toronto, Canada, about the physician of the future, right? But the difference here is that when this physician make predictions, he made a prediction about 40 years. So he made a prediction about, okay, we are 66. When we are in 2000, right, this is what's going to happen with medicine. And all the predictions really happened, was really about like incorporation of technology and computers and algorithms in our day-to-day clinical practice. But here's the difference, right? It took 50 years for those predictions to happen, right? Now, the predictions we make today for the future of healthcare will not happen in 50 years. They're going to happen in 5 years, 7 years, right? And that's the challenge. So the change between the present and the future of the health professional in general, and the gap between the way we educate health professionals and how health professionals work and practice medicine, it's each time shorter, right? The changes are much faster now, and that's a huge, real challenge for us. So here's a reflection. I brought here a reflection from Deloitte about the physician of the future, because that may help us to think about change and how to change and change in which direction, right? And this is a phenomenon that's happening around the world. I'm very close with, like, for example, here in the US and in Latin America, that the medical student today, they realize that they can be doctors, physicians, without practicing clinical medicine, right? So the medical students today, they say, okay, I can finish medical school, but I don't need to take care of patients directly. I can be a manager, I can be a CMO, I can fund a startup, a health tech startup, and do medicine for being like a CEO of a health tech company, right? So more and more, students are realizing the potential of medicine that's not only focused on direct clinical care, and many of them, and more, are really going through different directions. So I'm going to play this video here from Deloitte that gives this sense.
Evolving and elevating the role of physicians is critical to the future of health and the impact healthcare organizations will have in it. Today's physician is battling against growing industry challenges. Rising costs of care, mounting administrative tasks, and increasing cases of burnout are preventing physicians from driving increased value. But what does the physician of the future look like? And how do we get there? In the future of health, we see physicians playing a combination of 8 critical roles: complex care manager, digital consultant, analytic consultant, proceduralist, data and informatics specialist, researcher, executive, and educator. All powered by a technology-enabled, evolving care model. But physicians won't be able to navigate this transition on their own. To help them, healthcare organizations should focus on creating an environment that affirms physicians as partners in care, rather than employees to be managed. Executing a physician-led change management process that equips them to drive change rather than resist it. And making smart investments in workforce and technology based on the future, not the past. These changes won't happen overnight. But taking steps now to remove obstacles can position physicians to play an increasingly valuable and rewarding role in the future of health.
And I do think that there's really applicable for like medical education
Evolving
in general
and elevating
and universities. So to finalize my last slide, it's really a provocation for us to think every day that we are at work in medical education and healthcare, right? Is really how can we plant the innovation seed in our routine work activities, right? Every day in small activities, how can we plant this innovation seed and this innovative mindset in order to drive organizational transformation in medical education? That's really the challenge that I really think if we do that in our daily activities, everything we do, how can we innovate in everything we do, simple things, complex things? That's what we're going to, at the organizational level, facilitate our transformation in medical education. So thank you very much for your attention.
Dr. Diaz, thank you very much for your nice presentation. Actually, we learned about the conceptual framework of the change at first from your presentation. And then we have some conclusions in our minds, I think. For example, everything is changing in the world. The only thing that doesn't change is the change itself. So first we need to be aware of the change, and then we try to adapt ourselves at personal and institutional level to those changes. And it's not enough, I think, and also we need to transform our understandings in terms of maybe a kind of mind shift we need to create a transformational change at organizational level. And also, I think it's not enough. We need to imagine the at least 10 years ahead of our time to take required measures in our profession, especially in medical education. Thank you very much. It's really impressive. Actually, we were waiting much more technology-focused presentation, so it was really impressive for us. I'd like to ask the audience if there are any questions, comments. Yes, I can see someone. I think we have a mic. Okay.
Hi, thank you for your presentation again. What I wanted to ask is, as a student, we ask and try for change, but always get a no, mostly from, if not one teacher, but from the other. What are we supposed to do when we get so many no's and so many, I'm not interested in this, I'm not doing this work, this is not my interest. Even if you go with the idea and try to do all the work, they just say no sometimes. So what are we supposed to do when these kinds of changes happen? Like, how can we change this mindset?
Great question. And I didn't hear the beginning, but are you a medical student? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. So yeah, I have opportunity to talk to a lot of medical students. And as I mentioned, not only here in the United States, but also in Latin America. And yeah, I hear the same thing everywhere, right? And I can also remember from my medical school time, what I've seen medical students doing, right? Because as I mentioned, like if your organization is not prepared to change and to facilitate change, it's very difficult to do that like individually, right? What I've seen is students coming together and creating alternative ways of like innovating, right? And really, so for example, one very common way is like creating a group of students, and let's say they have a huge, for example, a very common demand for students now is to learn about entrepreneurship and innovation, right? But the medical school doesn't have that. They say, oh, why are we going to teach you that? You're here to learn medicine, right? But that's a demand I've seen everywhere. So the students organize themselves and create these like groups and innovation groups and study groups. And by themselves, they organize events, right? And then what I've seen is that some universities are seeing that as a great thing, but organized by students and are really incorporating that, right? So I would say that change alone and try to change your organization alone is very difficult. So if you find other people who also have your mindset, try to organize that in the way that you organize events and you multiply the innovative mindset among other students. And maybe you're going to find like one faculty who also have that mindset and bring that faculty, because then you have now an ally, right? And then you're going to map your map of stakeholders within and outside the organization that can also join forces. So I've seen students creating like groups of like hackathons for like creating startups, and really, I think identifying other people have the same mindset and organizing yourself in a way that you're going to show value to the organization. But I know that's very difficult task.
Thank you so much for your answer.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. Can we have the mic here?
Ben teşekkür ederim konuşma için. Sorum şu, değişimin çok önemli olduğunu öğrendik bugün Profesör Diyaz'dan. Ama bu dönüşümsel değişimin farklı yönlerden geldiğini de biliyoruz. Son 2 yılda yaşadığımız COVID'in bizde bir dönüşümsel değişim yarattığı tıp eğitiminde, kesin dünyada da Türkiye'de de. Acaba beklenmedik durumlarda kurumlar buna nasıl hazırlıklı olmalıdır diye yanıtlaştırıyorum. Teşekkür ederim.
Okay, thank you. The Dr. Sayek mentions about the transformational change, and he says there are many factors affecting the change. For example, COVID-19 pandemic process were very effective and very effective process, increasing the speed or fasting of our changing processes. So in such conditions like COVID-19 process, in unexpected conditions, what kind of measures can the institutions make or take? The question is this, is it clear?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a very good point. Because the pandemic, right? The pandemic did something like most of the things very negative, right? And unfortunately, with all the burden to the patients and our families. And on the other hand, the pandemic forced us to change, right? We had no option, right? We had to change. Think about medical education, right? Oh, I don't like online learning. doesn't matter. You have to do online learning, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, right. I think this is not the way students should do, but yeah, so it forced us to change. Of course, we were not prepared, right? Because when that's a real challenge when I see this like unanticipated forces, because what we did is not that we moved to some online learning because we are preparing the technology for that. We use a technology that was created and designed for business meetings, Zoom, right? And then we adapt that to do learning, right? And people are doing simulations through Zoom and trying to do like patient communications. A lot of people around the world are doing like patient encounters and taking care of patients through Zoom, right? But the technology was not designed with that purpose, right? So that's one of the challenges. But what I've seen the most is that, especially the resistant part, right? The people who are really resistant to change, once they were forced to change, then they saw, oh, it's not too bad. Actually now, right, I'm working from home and I will never work from home. I think everyone should be off, but now I was forced to do that. And after 2 years, actually, I'm getting a lot of more productivity if I stay some days at home. And that really forced us to see the other light of change. So I agree, right? But, and then I also say that we cannot rely on pandemic to help us to change, right? But we should take advantage of that learning point, because as humans, we're going to forget the learning point very soon, right? So we should take advantage of that learning point, that change is not at all bad. Sometimes we're forced to change and we can see the good side of the change. So that's my lesson from the pandemic and other like unanticipated events.
Okay. Actually, you mean if you are not resistant to change, somehow you can adapt yourself to new unexpected conditions. Am I right?
Yeah, I think that's what's proven, right? Is that one way or another, we can adapt. But the best way for driving change is really having a very well planned way, right? And not relying on pandemics, let's say.
Thank you. So we are at the end of the time allocated for us. Dr. Diaz, thank you very much for your kind contribution to our Congress. I think you can hear the applause from the audience, and in the future, we really hope to see you in here, Turkey, in real life conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much again for the invitation. It was a great pleasure to be here today, and thank you everyone for organizing committee and the audience.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.